Are you freer right now or less secure? As Congress fights over the Patriot Act, several surveillance programs are put on hold. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. The debate is as old as America itself. Which is more important, your privacy or your security? And how much of one are you willing to give up to get more of the other? A 21st century version of the argument is playing out right now behind me on Capitol Hill. A handful of provisions of the Patriot Act have been suspended in a tug of war over individual liberty and collective protection. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel leads off tonight with an elusive effort to find the right balance.
We'll have a vote on that legislation as soon as we can.
The Senate Majority Leader used that language because fellow Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul is running the clock to cause a lapse in three components of the Patriot Act. This morning, Paul said he won.
Beginning this week, the government will not collect your phone records in bulk, so I think that's a huge victory.
What expired at midnight were three national security tools: the NSA's collection of phone records, the date, time, and phone numbers involved, what's known as metadata; roving wiretap authority, which allows the FBI to continue tracking terror suspects who use disposable cell phones to avoid surveillance; and a lone wolf provision to allow tracking of those believed to be plotting attacks on their own. Fellow Republicans say Paul demonized the NSA's work.
We're not listening to people's phone calls. There is no content collected.
Facing a midnight deadline, the Senate voted 77-17 last night to move forward with the bipartisan USA Freedom Act, which would have telecom companies store phone data instead of the NSA. The White House ripped Paul for stopping the bipartisan House measure.
It's ironic, to say the least, that Senator Paul blocked a piece of legislation that would have actually solved the problem that he was talking about. So that may have been an effective campaign tactic, but it certainly wasn't in the best interest of the country.
Fellow presidential candidate Rick Santorum said it isn't all about Rand Paul.
You get all this media chasing you around, you think you're really important, you think you're the center of attention. But the bottom line is, this is about the national security of our country.
McConnell said he'd like to improve it with amendments to make sure the new system actually works.
These fixes are common sense, and whatever one thinks of the proposed new system, there needs to be basic assurance that it will function as its proponents say that it will. The Senate should adopt these basic safeguards.
Yet the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, is warning against changes. Quote, any departure from this carefully crafted compromise will undoubtedly reduce support for it in the House and prolong the expiration of these intelligence tools. Despite the lapse, Ernest says the intelligence community has other capabilities, such as the NSA's ability to listen to terrorist phone calls overseas, which isn't being challenged by Congress.
Our national security professionals have other tools that they can use to conduct investigations.
There is great frustration with many senators who say if they were going to accept the House bill, they should have done so over Memorial Day weekend. There is also irritation about allowing Rand Paul to turn this issue into a huge campaign fundraiser. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill tonight. Mike, thanks. Much more on this with the panel. Since 9/11, security has been the clear winner over privacy when it comes to airline travel. But tonight we're learning that no matter how invasive those TSA agents are in the screening line, they apparently are missing a whole lot. Here's Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge.
The internal investigation by the TSA found security failures at dozens of airports. And more than a decade after 9/11, investigators smuggled banned weapons or fake explosives through security checkpoints. An aide to the Senate chairman of Homeland Security, Republican Ron Johnson, said he's reviewing the report, adding it raises, quote, valid concerns. Taxpayers have spent billions of dollars to secure our air travel system. It's important for that goal to be met. Last year, $7 billion was budgeted for the TSA.
It's even really not that much better than it was before 9/11 because this is really meant to be a deterrent. It's not the Great Wall of China.
The classified report found TSA screeners failed 95% of the time, 67 out of 70 tests, carried out by special investigators known as red teams. In one instance, an undercover agent with a fake bomb strapped to his back set off a magnetometer, but the screener still failed to find it during a follow-up pat-down. This test was supposed to mimic the underwear bomb that got through security and nearly brought down a jet over Detroit on Christmas Day 2009. Critics also point out the vast majority of plots are thwarted by good intelligence, not pat-downs.
All of them were stopped by going out, investigating, sharing information, and discovering plots long before they came to fruition.
Just last week at a New York airport, the head of Homeland Security emphasized what's going well.
In fiscal year 2014 alone, we screened some 16.4 million passengers through pre-clearance and denied boarding to some 10,000 individuals.
Briefed on the findings, Homeland Security officials said Johnson immediately directed TSA to implement changes, adding the 95% failure rate doesn't tell the whole story. Quote, the numbers in these reports never look good out of context, but they are a critical element in the continual evolution of our aviation security.
Another recent investigation looked at checked baggage and found, quote, vulnerabilities throughout the system because of tech problems and human error, Brett.
I mean, 95% out of context.
I don't know how any kind of context makes that look acceptable.
All right, Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, stocks were up today. The Dow gained 30. The S&P 500 finished ahead 4. The Nasdaq was up 13. 3 suicide bombers hit an Iraqi police base today in a coordinated assault. Dozens were killed or injured. The attack comes as President Obama's ISIS strategy continues to draw fire. And as 5 of senior Taliban leaders, potentially some of the world's most dangerous terrorists, are putting their travel plans on hold. Correspondent Kevin Corke is at the White House tonight.
In welcoming the Dutch monarch to the White House, President Obama hailed the long-standing U.S. ally as a key partner in the fight against ISIS.
We discussed our shared concerns in other parts of the world, including in the Middle East, where Dutch troops work alongside U.S. and other coalition members to help defeat ISIL and to stabilize Iraq.
Side by side perhaps, but amid rising threats throughout the Middle East. In Iraq, there were more funeral processions as ISIS fighters used car bombs to strike a police base in Anbar province, killing at least 45 and injuring more than 60 others. This on a day when anti-government militants stormed an Afghan police headquarters in Jalalabad, wounding at least 9 policemen there. The Taliban claimed responsibility for that attack, just as Qatar agreed to extend the travel restrictions on the so-called Taliban 5, who were released last year from Guantanamo Bay in exchange for Bo Bergdahl.
Those restrictions under the agreement that was initially reached would be put in place for a year, and the path forward is something that we're discussing now with the Qataris.
The Army sergeant was charged with desertion, but former CIA Director General David Petraeus told Fox News the swap for Bergdahl was still the right thing to do.
The way he fell into the enemy's hand is immaterial. He's one of ours. He's held. He was a prisoner, a hostage, and we needed to get him back.
But some lawmakers, like Missouri Republican Representative Vicky Hartzler, strongly disagreed, saying the White House may have broken the law in the process.
They went around Congress and they worked out this deal and released these terrorists without notifying us, and that's wrong.
Meanwhile, in Yemen, one of 4 Americans held by Shiite Houthi rebels was released today. The White House, citing privacy concerns, said little else about the remaining 3. The Iranian-backed Houthis have been battered by Saudi airstrikes with the aid of U.S. intelligence. And in an interview with an Israeli television network, President Obama said keeping Iran nuclear-free remains his top priority.
I can, I think, demonstrate, not based on any hope, but on facts and evidence and analysis, that the best way to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon is a verifiable, tough agreement.
When ISIS overran Iraqi military troops last year in Mosul, the second largest city in that country, we are told tonight by the Prime Minister of that country that they lost some 2,300 Humvee armored vehicles, making it much easier for ISIS to fight and the road to victory that much tougher for the Iraqis. Brett?
Kevin Corke, live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thank you. Just in from Capitol Hill, 10:30 tomorrow morning. The cloture vote on the USA Freedom Act. Up next, a new presidential candidate who says he is the most qualified on national security. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Q13 Fox Seattle, as animal rights activists chain themselves to construction equipment to try to prevent the development of an animal research facility. The lab is being built for the University of Washington. Fox 5 in New York with street closings and traffic delays from yesterday's crane accident. A 4-ton air conditioning unit was dropped from about 30 stories up. 10 people were injured, but no one was killed or seriously hurt. And this is a live look at Los Angeles from our affiliate Fox 11. The big story there tonight, the debut of Caitlyn Jenner. That is the new name for former Olympic decathlon champion Bruce Jenner. Caitlyn Jenner appears on the July cover of Vanity Fair magazine following the transformation. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.